Hello, and welcome to our next video segment in our diabetes class. In this segment, I will be talking about types of fat in our diet and how it can impact our heart health, and sodium in our diet and how that can impact our health. In the next video segment after this one, I'll be talking about meal planning for diabetes prevention and management and label reading. And in my first video segment, which was part 2 of the diabetes class, I covered carbohydrates, sugar, starch, fiber, everything you need to know about carbohydrates in diabetes management and prevention. So feel free to go back and watch the previous one if you haven't watched that yet, or if you want to rewatch it. Just feel free to consume these video segments at a pace that is right for you. So watch as many as you can at a time, or just watch one over a few weeks, every day, or over a few days, over a few weeks, to help you process the information at a pace that's best for you. So today I'm going to be focusing in this segment, I will be focusing on fats. And why is that important when you have diabetes? It isn't often the first thing that pops into your mind when you think of diabetes management. However, when we have diabetes, you are at an increased risk for cardiovascular disease. And we know that the types of fat in our diet can impact cholesterol levels in our blood. Some fats have a positive effect on our heart health by lowering your risk for heart disease and stroke. Some fats can increase your risk for heart disease and stroke if you consume too much of them. So we need to be aware of what types of fat can impact and how they impact our heart health. And we should not avoid fat. It's certainly got an important role in our diet and in our bodies. It also helps to absorb nutrients and it gives us energy. So not something to be scared of, but something to know more about. So the types of fat that can protect your heart health are unsaturated fats. They protect your heart health by raising HDL cholesterol. This type of cholesterol is healthy for your heart. It can clean up the plaque buildup in your arteries and protects against heart attack and stroke. We want high levels of HDL cholesterol. That's how I remember which cholesterol is good and which one's not great for our heart. H is for healthy, and we want high levels, which also starts with H. LDL cholesterol, however, is the cholesterol that can increase your risk for heart disease and stroke if the levels are too high in your blood. It deposits plaque on your arteries, which can cause them to harden and stiffen, can narrow the space for your blood to flow through. It can also increase your risk for clots and heart disease and stroke. So LDL cholesterol is one that we want low levels of. The good news is that eating unsaturated fats in your diet can help lower LDL cholesterol in your diet. So foods that have unsaturated fats in them include vegetable oils like canola, olive, grapeseed, and avocado, margarines, nuts like peanuts, walnuts, almonds, pecans, cashews, etc., all nuts, seeds like pumpkin and sunflower seeds, as well as ground flaxseed, chia, hemp hearts. Avocados are a great source of healthy fats, unsaturated fats, and fatty fish. So salmon, mackerel, sardines, trout are all examples of fish that have high levels of unsaturated fats that protect your heart health. Here are some tips on how you can incorporate more unsaturated fat into your diet. Consider eating fish 2 to 3 days a week. Use canola, olive, grapeseed, or avocado oil when cooking. Sprinkle ground flaxseed on your cereal, salads, and yogurt, and have a 1/4 cup of nuts or seeds every day. Now, the types of fats that can have a negative impact on your heart health are saturated and trans fats. Saturated fats can they can raise your LDL cholesterol levels. So they're raising the cholesterol that increases your risk for heart disease and heart attack and stroke. Trans fats can also raise that LDL cholesterol, but it can also decrease the healthy HDL cholesterol. So definitely the trans fats have a double negative effect on your heart health and are best to try and limit in your diet. Foods that contain trans fats include processed foods, baked goods that are bought at the store, like cookies and pastries and pies and etc. Foods like that. Processed foods like snacky foods too, like chips. Salty snacky foods like chips can sometimes be high in saturated fat, in trans fats. As well, fried foods tend to be high in trans fats. When you cook foods at very high temperatures, that can cause trans fats to be in that product. So fried chicken, French fries, fried foods like that tend to be high in trans fats. Best to limit and enjoy in small amounts in your diet. Saturated fats are found in butter, lard, and shortening, high-fat dairy products like milk, yogurts, and cheeses, as well as coconut and palm oils, and fatty cuts of meat and chicken with the skin on. So these are foods to try and limit your consumption of. Some strategies of foods that you can incorporate more of to help lower that saturated fat intake include lean proteins and meat alternatives like eggs and turkey and chicken. Choose lower fat dairy options more often, like 1 and 2% milk fat yogurts, milks, lower fat sour creams, and cottage cheeses. If you enjoy cream in your coffee, consider trying a 5% cream instead of a 10 or full fat cream. And choose cheeses that are less than 20% milk fat. When you're preparing meat to cook, you can trim the visible fat off of that meat and drain the fat off after you've cooked it. Use lower fat cooking methods like poaching and steaming, broiling, baking, barbecuing. If you are going to saute a food in some fat, maybe incorporate a non-stick pan and unsaturated fat, a small amount of unsaturated fat like a canola oil to fry that food. And choose plant-based proteins more often, like tofu and legumes, beans, chickpeas, black beans, kidney beans, nuts and seeds, tempeh, all example of plant-based proteins that are naturally low in fat and don't have saturated fat in them. The next topic that I was going to talk about today, or in this video segment, is sodium. It can affect our blood pressure when we have too much sodium in our diet. It can cause us to retain water, and that causes excess pressure to be put on your blood vessels. That added stress can cause them to thicken and narrow, which restricts the blood flow that can occur through those narrow arteries. So that increases your risk for heart disease. Our bodies do need a certain amount of sodium to function. It performs a vital function in our bodies. However, it's easy to consume too much of it. The amounts that you need are listed here on the slide, and it depends on your age. So the age categories and recommended amounts between 1,200 and 1,500 milligrams. When we get more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium in our diet a day, that can put you at risk for some of those complications of too much. So high blood pressure, for example. 2,300 milligrams is the equivalent of 1 teaspoon of salt. It is possible to limit the salt in our diet by not adding salt at the table and limiting how much we are not using it in our cooking, or limiting how much we use it in our cooking and baking. But about 75% of the sodium in our diet is not coming from what we add to our foods, but is already present in the foods we get from the grocery store in North America. 75% of that sodium intake comes from processed packaged foods. It takes a conscious effort to reduce how much sodium that you're eating in a day, but it can be done. And I encourage you, when you're working on decreasing sodium intake, to do so slowly. It takes about a month for your taste buds to adjust to lower sodium eating, but if you eliminate all of the salt in your diet at one time, or a significant amount of salt in your diet at one time, your food can taste bland and not very pleasant. Within a month, you'll get used to that, but if you want to do it on a more gradual basis so you don't go through that cold turkey experience, maybe just start choosing one lower sodium product at a time and just reducing the amount of salt you add by a little bit over the month so that by the end of the month you are eating a lower amount of salt and still enjoying the taste of your food. When trying to reduce sodium in your diet, it's important to know where sodium is in your diet. Reading the nutrition facts panel is a helpful tool for you to realize where salt is in your diet. When you're reading a nutrition facts panel, the first step I encourage you to look at is the serving size. This is the reference amount for the rest of the nutrients and amounts on the nutrition facts panel. It's not necessarily the amount that you eat or the amount that is recommended. It's just a reference number. If you're going to eat twice the amount that's listed as the serving size, just be aware that you would then be consuming twice the amount of the nutrients that are listed on the nutrition facts panel. As well as when you're comparing products, make sure you're comparing a similar serving size or adjust the numbers accordingly. The second item to look at to help you learn if there's a lot or a little of a nutrient in a food is the percent daily value. It's on the right-hand column of the nutrition facts panel. 5% or less is considered a little bit of a nutrient. 15% or more is considered a lot. The last step I encourage you to look at is the nutrient itself. So when it comes to an item like sodium, we want less of that in our food. So comparing products to find ones that have less, or finding products that have less than 5% daily value of sodium would be a great choice. If the product contains 15% or more, that would be a product you want to limit more in your diet. You can still eat it, but maybe not every day, and maybe not eating products that have more than 15% multiple times a day is something to consider. As well, saturated and trans fats are nutrients that we want less of, so the 15 and 5% daily value guideline applies to that as well. For items like fiber, you want more fiber in your diet, so choosing foods that do have more than 15% dietary fiber, as well as calcium, vitamin A, iron, vitamin C. Often choosing ones that have more than the 15% daily value are good choices. Those are good nutrients to have in your diet. So here are some tips to help you reduce the sodium in your diet. These are just some suggestions to consider. Reflect on your own habits and see where you may be able to make some adjustments, or maybe you can think of some other thoughts that aren't listed here. So eating fresh foods more often just naturally lowers the amount of sodium in your diet. Limiting takeout foods and processed foods to less often, maybe on a weekly or monthly basis, to help reduce sodium overall in your diet. When you buy canned products, they can be useful in your cooking, like canned beans are such a convenient item. You may want to rinse them and drain them before you cook with them. Same as canned vegetables. They're a nutritious, cost-effective option, but do tend to have higher sodium, but you can drain them and rinse them to reduce that salt. You can read the food labels on your nutrition facts panel on foods that you're choosing to choose ones that are lower in sodium. Try low sodium spice blends when you're cooking to flavor your food. But just because you limit salt doesn't mean you can't have flavor in your food. You just might need to experiment with different spices and herbs. Citrus juices and citrus zests can add wonderful flavor. And there are packaged spice blends like Mrs. Dash and PC Blue Menu, and McCormick has low sodium spice options for you to consider purchasing and trying out in your cooking. And try to limit the use of salt at the table and in your cooking. And try to rarely eat foods that are pickled or salted, smoked, cured. All of those foods tend to be high in salt or high in sodium. And if you're just limiting those foods, you're going to have a lower sodium intake overall. So some take-home messages to remember about fat and sodium are: try to eat more unsaturated fats to help protect your heart health. raise that HDL cholesterol, lower the LDL cholesterol. Choose lean protein and plant-based proteins more often to help reduce your intake of saturated fat. Aim to eat fatty fish 2 to 3 times per week. Choose less processed foods, lower in sodium, saturated, and trans fat. And flavor foods that you enjoy with herbs and spices and aromatics. Now, at this time, I want to invite you to reflect on what you've just learned and your current habits. Is there something you'd like to add to your habits that would help protect your health and prevent and help you manage diabetes? Or is there something you want to change? If so, I encourage you to make a SMART goal. A SMART goal is one that is specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and has a time frame. So something specific you can do. Based on this segment today, maybe you want to set a goal around increasing the amount of unsaturated fat in your diet to protect your heart health. So maybe you could choose to add a 1/4 cup of nuts to your day every day for the next 2 weeks after your next grocery shop. So maybe that's realistic for you, maybe it's not. We'll say that maybe 5 days a week is more realistic, so we'll go with that. After that, in 2 weeks, check back in with that goal and assess if you were able to achieve that. If you were able to eat a 1/4 cup of nuts 5 days a week, you'll be able to say, yeah, I did that, way to go. Pat yourself on the back and then reflect and think about your habits. And if you want to add something else or make a change, set another SMART goal. If that didn't work well, evaluate it. What went well? What didn't go well? How could you change that to make it easier? Or maybe there's a better time to do this, or maybe there's another goal that would be better to work on right now. It's a process that you can approach with curiosity to figure out how you can make changes that are sustainable, that you can keep, and that will contribute to a big impact on your health in the long term. Sometimes you can find it helpful to recruit a friend or a family member to help you with that check-in process or remind you to do that, or set an alarm on your phone, a reminder to check in on that in a few weeks. So thank you for listening today. I encourage you to please contact us with any questions or concerns. You can call the Stratford Family Health Team to book a virtual appointment with Lisa or myself, or you can email us to answer some questions you may have. Thank you.